Hi, everyone. Welcome to the webinar today. We're going to get started in just a couple of minutes. We're going to give others a few more minutes to join us, and then we'll get started. Thanks so much for joining. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. Welcome to today's webinar about increasing your ENERGY STAR ratings through reduced utility consumption and improved data validity. So my name is Michelle Winters. I'm VP of Solutions here at Goby. And before I introduce today's speakers, I wanted to remind everyone listening that we will save time at the end of the webinar to answer some questions. You can also submit questions at any time during the session through the GoToWebinar interface. And this webinar will also be recorded with a copy of the recording and slides being emailed out to all registrants after the webinar. All right, so for today we have two presenters. So Rob is the Vice President of Energy Engineering at Energy Evolution Partners, a premier energy engineering and consulting firm specializing in both design and build energy efficiency projects, energy efficiency project financing, utility supply procurement, and energy management strategies. He has over 20 years of experience working for and partnering with Fortune 500 companies, global enterprises, medium-sized businesses across industries and verticals. He also has experience covering a depth of executive leadership, energy engineering, senior-level operations management, and large-scale project management, and Six Sigma deployment. And we also have Josh Schubert, who is our Director of Energy Engineering here at Goby. He's one of the original Gobys, the very first employee. He's been with us since day one, 10 years this month, which is great. Goby is an enterprise data platform for commercial real estate and a leading provider of accounts payable automation and strategic ESG solutions. He's had a huge contribution towards our ENERGY STAR experience and has earned us a Sustained Excellence Award from the EPA for the last 3 years. And we're the most active ENERGY STAR certifier, handling 10% of all ENERGY STAR building certifications. So a lot of that's thanks to Josh. And Josh, go ahead and take it away.
Great. Thanks, Michelle. Thanks for joining, everyone. It's a busy time in ENERGY STAR, at least a lot of things going on. Our agenda today, we're going to kind of quickly move through what happened and talk a little bit about the current state of the program. And then the bulk of our time is really going to get into the things you can do now to help your profiles, and how are we going to, get our profiles back up to where they have been if they've dropped, or seems to be the prevalent case across the board. But we want to talk quite a bit about a few things today, and we'll kind of get started right away with what happened. And here, a couple of months ago, right at the end of August, the EPA updated the underlying metrics for 7 space types in the U.S. So these are a big piece of what the EPA does for ENERGY STAR, and they needed to update those metrics since they were pretty old. The metrics they were based on were from 2003. So they updated it to the current set that they have now, which is 2012. So that making up 9 years, adjusted a lot of the basis that the properties were on. You can kind of see on the example there that 70 to 80% of K through 12 schools were above a 75. So the EPA spent a lot of time and a lot of effort recalculating so that a 50 ENERGY STAR is the national median. So they kind of flatten out that line for the score range. For averages, the buildings came across with for instance, with an office, a 12 score change. Across the board, I've spoken with a ton of customers and seen a lot of buildings get reduced 20 or 25 points. So that 12 points for offices, or 13 points for schools, 7 for warehouses, that was really just an average across the board. And so an average being half of them, a lot of buildings took a larger hit. A lot of buildings took a smaller hit. So it was really kind of in between for that 12. I was hoping it would be 12 points for a lot of people, but really some people were surprised. I think a lot of folks feel rather deflated with all their efforts that they've put into their energy efficiency. Just a quick side note: there's a few things that actually affected all buildings. They brought back the data center estimates, so we're able to apply estimates for any area, any server rooms and data centers that have more than 75 kW of constant power. So we think that it's going to be generally helpful to account for those spaces in profile. So we can really do that in any building that has that space type. Another thing that helped a lot of buildings, especially the all-electric buildings, is the source energy adjustment that the EPA made for the U.S. grid. Could be a couple of points depending on your fuel mixture, but if you're all-electric, that would generally tended to give folks a little bit of a bonus. On to some of the data that we have. So the data that Goby saw, so we've got quite a few buildings in our platform, and the observations that we have are actually similar to what the EPA reported a few days after the score change. Approximately half of the buildings that used to be above a 75 no longer are, and actually that is precisely what happened for Goby too. So a lot of folks got knocked out of eligibility, and we can kind of see here that the folks with the higher scores fell the least. It's kind of like kind of saying how it was deflating for the folks that have worked so hard to get to that 75. A lot of them fell into the 50s. We've got a historic skyscraper in Chicago that we work with that's run by an able engineering guy who's just brilliant with running his building. They tried really hard to get to that 75, and they finally made it this year. We were able to submit them for an award, and now unfortunately they've got a lot of ground to make up with the new score change. Kind of a little note on regionals. We've got a fairly large data set, and this data set here primarily made up of offices and warehouse. But you can kind of see the northern states averaging a little further. But like I said, this is an average, so a lot of them, some of the data points in this average are 20, 25 point drops. Some of them are 5, 6, 8 point drops. So those are averaging to these values. I guess the outlier you kind of see on this screen is really California. They did have lesser of an average reduction. I think I'd kind of point to a lot of the work that California's been doing with their Title 24 initiatives. So a lot of the buildings that we work with in California tended to be higher scores, so they really worked their way into the higher tiers where that fell lesser than other folks, like in Illinois. As far as the current state of the program, so program actually is been on hold for these buildings that have had their metric change. So the EPA, I imagine they got a lot of pushback with the new scores. So they pumped the brakes and said, okay, we're going to do this 3-phase program. We're gonna listen to our customers, listen to our stakeholders. We're going to analyze the data analyze the feedback, listen to the data, or review the data, and then we're going to communicate the plan of what's going on with the data, if it's true, and I think that hasn't been a lot of information coming out from them about this. They really just did the survey at the beginning of October, so we're looking forward to hearing from the EPA, what kind of when they expect to resume certifications. I think Goby snuck a few office buildings in between that when they announced the everything was going to be on hold to when it actually did go on hold. So I got lucky with a couple of them, but that right now, like any office buildings that are eligible even after the score change, because there are plenty of buildings that are still eligible after the score change. Not everyone got bumped into the 50s, so we can still submit some buildings once they open the program back up for certification review. That being said, they're gonna still loosen some of the deadlines. They've told us and a lot of the stakeholders and service providers that they're going to loosen some of these deadlines for 2018. They want to ensure that a building that wants to get a 2018 award, that's eligible to get a 2018 award with their score, that they can still get it. So they said that we don't have any time frames right now. So because everything's on hold, we can't submit them. They're not really going to be held to this. We've got a November 15 deadline. We've got a December 31 deadline. And so the EPA has said that they're going to really be able to work with the buildings if they can and want to still earn a 2018 award. On a side note for that too, the unaffected buildings like multifamily and senior living and those types of buildings, they're unaffected by the metric change, and there's a deadline next week. So we want to get them in for the next week's deadline, and make sure that they earn the 2018 award if they want it. So as far as moving forward, what we really want to do is review your score, make sure we account for all the variables. We want to get some things updated, make sure that the data centers are being accounted for properly. We want to make sure that your people counts are correct, your vacant square footage is correct, your overall gross square footage is correct. So there's some accounting things that we can do to make sure that the profile is correct in order to maximize your score and make sure it's as true as it possibly can be. So that's really that's checking your profile, making sure it's current and complete. You can send some, if you have other things that you need updated, you've added some folks to your properties, or some vacant square footage has increased in your properties, we need to know about that. So that's really on the profile side. What's left is saving energy. So you've got kind of two aspects here. You can make sure your profile is correct, or you can say, and you should save some energy. So one way that we want to get started on saving energy, and now that your score is reduced, how are we going to get to our targets? So we need to build a plan. By building a plan, we can set a target, and the EPA provides some tools in Energy Star Portfolio Manager to set your targets. So this screen might be familiar. It's a screen in Energy Star Portfolio Manager. Here's an example of a building that they were awarded an 81 in 2018. So after the metric change, they dropped to a 65. So that 16 point drop is somewhat average in some cases. But how do I make up those 10 points? And it is possible to make up 10 points. So I've seen it done. I've seen it done many times. And we set a target in Portfolio Manager to get to that 75. In particular, for this case, this building needs to put together a plan to save $324,000, which is 13% of their overall energy use, to get back to a 75. So with a little bit of help and some planning, excuse me, and some thoughts on implementation, we've got Rob here with Evolution. And he's going to discuss planning and implementation for getting some of these projects through and making sure that you get the savings that you deserve.
All right. Hey, Josh. Good afternoon, everyone. So I'm going to piggyback on what on the two major points that Josh was going over, which is again, making sure that those data inputs into Portfolio Manager are updated, validated, accurate, and then also talk about really the most impactful way to improve your score, which is increasing energy efficiency. So to do that, really starts with the energy audit. The energy audit, as it applies to the inputs, right, we want to investigate, we want to update, we want to validate those inputs into Portfolio Manager. We start asking some questions. When was the last time that you updated your property details? Is the square footage still accurate? Did you add another floor? Did you add an addition? Have your building load types or use types changed? So, following up that, taking a look at some examples. So for our office building owners out there, might sound odd to some, but what we come across this quite often, which is, first and foremost, are your hours of operation accurate? A lot of building owners will take a look at it and say, well, we're an office building, we're here 9 to 5, 5 days a week, that's 40 hours. Well, in fact, many times you'll have a substantial number of your tenants that are coming in at 7 a.m. And a substantial number that are staying until 7 p.m., for example. Also, you're kicking on your mechanical loads at, say, 6 a.m. in order to condition the space prior to tenants arriving. So we need to take those things into consideration. Occupancy, obviously, that's a big one. You may not have updated your inputs into Portfolio Manager for 3 years, or you haven't updated them since you originally set up the property in Portfolio Manager. So were you at 65% occupancy then? Maybe you're at 90 now. So it's something to look at. A lot of times our customers will forget to include their parking areas, so whether it's uncovered parking or parking garages and things like that. Updating the number of workers on main shift if that's changed. Adding a data center. Data centers are obviously huge energy-intensive loads. We actually had a customer who added 100,000 square feet of data center and never updated it in Portfolio Manager. So again, some different things we want to take a look at. There's a lot more, but these are some of the things that, again, we'll investigate and be able to validate through energy audits. Another example, hotels. Again, occupancy, obviously that's a big deal for hotels. Again, is your Portfolio Manager showing your occupancy at 70%, but it's actually at 98% now? The number of hours a day that guests are on site, has that changed? It could be that you were outsourcing your laundry, 3 years ago, but you recently brought your terries and linens and stuff back in-house. Number of guest meals served changed over time. Again, just some more examples, and available rooms as well. So, again, there's a lot of different criteria that goes in the data inputs, so we want to be able to investigate and validate and update all of those. Hospitals, another one. We're talking about added load. We had a hospital customer that added 2 MRI machines, which are, again, very, very energy intensive. So that needs to be updated. Number of employees on the main shift and night shift. Is that still accurate? Is it the same as it was when you entered it originally? Staff beds, that never changed. We also have several hospital customers that add new wings onto the building. So that square footage needs to be improved or updated as well. So, again, all things that we'll look at through an energy audit as it applies to the accuracy of the data input into Portfolio Manager. The other benefit, of course, of energy audits is identifying and then implementing those energy conservation measures, those opportunities that we find through the energy audit. Again, I said this before, but this is the most impactful way to decrease your energy use intensity and increase your rating. And the good thing about energy conservation measures, the good thing about energy audits, no matter how good you are, there are always more opportunities, more cost-effective strategies that you can take advantage of. So on that point, the next slide we want to talk about are those measures that have the greatest impact, but also that have the best ROIs. There's a lot more than these. There could be dozens of different energy conservation measures or opportunities, but these are some of the ones that, again, have the lowest barriers, highest ROI, and the lowest cost. LED lighting upgrades. If you're still running on fluorescence and high-intensity discharge and things like that, you definitely, now is the time to upgrade to LED lighting. The quality, the price point, the varying types of lamps and bulbs and everything else in LED, this is the time to do it. Plus, utility companies they're throwing a lot of rebate money at it, so that's important as well. Variable frequency drives. If all of your larger horsepower pump motors, fans, air handling units, so your chilled water pumps, for example, your compressor on your chiller, your cooling tower fans. If you don't have variable frequency drives on those variable torque loads, it's a great opportunity and with a quick payback. EC motors, those are electronically commutated motors, high efficiency fractional horsepower motors. They're great for the fans and fan coil units, PTAC units, water source heat pumps, evaporator fans in walk-in refrigeration. EC motors run at about, they're DC motors that run at about 70 to 80% efficiency versus the shaded pole motors that are typically in these type of loads, which run around 30, 35%. So major difference. Occupancy-based thermostats. So pretty much, I would assume everybody on the call is probably familiar with occupancy-based thermostats in hotels, right? So they have a sensor on them. They know when the guest is in the room. They're pre-programmed to do a setback if that guest leaves the room for a predetermined amount of time. So you're saving energy because you're not heating or cooling the room to the guest set point. But when the guest returns, it quickly gets back, brings the systems and the temperature back up to the preferred set point. These are also great though for offices and schools. Both for during the day, but also for overnight, because when it's unoccupied, it automatically allows the building to go into a nighttime setback based upon the predetermined setback on the thermostats. Exhaust hood controls. If you have a hotel with a cafeteria or with a restaurant rather, hospitals, schools with cafeterias, restaurants, you have exhaust hoods in the kitchens that are there to updraft all of the smells and the smoke and everything else from the kitchen, but they're also sucking all the conditioned air out of the building. So that air, again, now we have to bring more outside air in and condition it, which costs money. And also the large horsepower motor in the updraft fan is just running constantly. Basically, you turn a switch, it just runs all day. If somebody doesn't turn it off, which happens all the time, it runs all night. So being able to control that is important. Now, a little bit more expensive are building automation systems and combined heat and power, but the payback on these is typically pretty good, and the energy savings are pretty significant. So building automation systems to be able to control really all the major mechanical and lighting systems in the building, on, off, ramp up, down, setback, modulate, and so forth. And then combined heat and power and solar and batteries attached on that. This is where you're generating your own power. So you're actually coming off the grid either entirely or in a large portion. So again, just some ideas. And then lastly is, so we want to find those opportunities again that are most cost effective, that have the fastest payback, the greatest ROI. Once we design that, right, now we want to find how much free money we can get, right? So our goal here is obviously we want to implement the energy efficiency plans. We want to increase that Energy Star score. But if we can, we want to be able to be able to move forward the project, have it financed potentially, and generate positive cash flow. Most of the time that leads to a higher likelihood of project adoption. So if we can finance a project and we have energy savings of say maybe $20,000 a month, and your payments on the financing are say $15,000 a month, that difference there, that $5,000 a month in cash flow or $60,000 a year in cash flow, now you've got all your energy efficiency in place, you're saving money, and you haven't paid a dime out of pocket. And again, now you're $60,000 in that example, $60,000 cash flow positive, which just drops right down to the bottom line, improving profit and EBITDA or cap on the building. So design the project to get the high ROI, the quick payback, and then we want to find that free money, grant money, utility rebates, be able to reduce the overall cost rate from the top. From there, there's some different funding options. One is equipment leasing financing, pays for the entire project. There's on-bill financing, which is an interesting one. So on-bill financing is pretty good from either third-party suppliers or the actual utilities like Eversource or National Grid, just as two examples. So if you have a third-party supply like Constellation or Direct Energy or Engie, we can finance, or they will finance the entire energy efficiency project, and you make your monthly payments back to them to pay for that on the utility bill itself. Same thing with the utility companies. So the nice thing about that is that it doesn't show up on the capital side of the ledger. It's an operational expense. That's particularly helpful to some of the business owners or the office building owners on the phone, some of the hoteliers on the phone, hospitality industry, because you may have some covenants in your lending documents with your primary lender on the building that may prohibit you from taking on additional debt. And this is one way to get around that, because again, it shows up on the operational expense. Then there's PPAs and ESAs. Those are basically PPA is a power purchase agreement, and ESA is an energy service agreement. So if you implement solar or cogen, you can either pay for it out of pocket, or the actual developer, the provider of the PPA or the ESA, will pay for it all up front. They'll own the equipment, they'll maintain it and everything else, and then what they do is they'll sell the power back to you at a discount. Meaning, say you're in Con Ed territory and you're spending 18 cents a kilowatt hour, well, the PPA or ESA provider may sell it back to you for, say, 14 or 15 cents. So again, you're taking a huge part of your load off the grid, off your utility bill, and at the same time, you're again making out because you're spending less for your kWh. Lastly, would be property assessed clean energy, PACE financing. That is a private-public way of funding. So in those states and in those municipalities that have approved it, it's basically financed at low interest rates through a lender, and then it is paid back through an assessment on the property tax for the property. So it's a nice win-win. So again, we want to find those. We want to get those audits going. Right, make sure that we find all the correct answers for the inputs to go into it. We want to develop some fast payback or high ROI ECMs, and then potentially finance them and make a cash flow positive for you. Josh, I'll turn it back over to you, sir.
Awesome. So actually, this is Michelle. I'm going to go ahead and read through some of the questions that we've started to receive. Just as a reminder for everyone who's listening in, at any time you can go ahead and submit your questions through the GoToMeeting. But first, to start us off, so one of the questions that we received was, and maybe I'll direct this back over to Rob, is are there any pitfalls that you're seeing or that we should look out for to avoid when pursuing any innovative technologies?
Oh, great question. Yeah, so you know, the tried and true proven engineering approaches that are out there, some of the ones I've listed and some other ones, obviously well established in the industry and in the field. I will tell you that there's always there's always snake oil salesmen out there, so you want to be careful. If it looks too good to be true, it is, and so you want to be careful of those types of things. But in general, like I said, if you have a good engineering firm, if you have a good energy engineering service, or you have good in-house folks, you know, those opportunities will present themselves, and you'll know.
Sure, and actually, I also was on a webinar with one of our clients. Actually, Sarah Neff out of Kilroy was talking about innovative technologies with the LA Better Buildings Challenge, and she actually had an interesting insight into using innovative technologies, like some of these cutting edge technologies, and it was check to make sure that they have insurance. You know, one of the things that me as an energy engineer, something I don't usually think of when I'm trying to bring a technology to a building, but you know, some people might have this startup company that's trying to pitch you something that's really awesome and could be really cool and one of the first of its kind. But make sure that you can't really do any business in commercial real estate if you don't have insurance. So kind of getting the ducks in a row. So Rob, be sure to have your insurance ready when everyone from this webinar asks you to do some work. But yeah, no, it's going to be certainly something that I wouldn't think of every day to ask someone that is coming to my building.
Yeah, and Josh, if I could just piggyback on that with another 30 seconds, and that is, sort of missed the part about innovative. So yeah, I mean, you obviously don't want to dismiss something that has that's innovative and potentially something new on the market that could be really great. One of the things that I have done historically in my career for both utility companies as well as private industry is to validate those things. So we will do the testing on it, on the technology. We'll do the assessments. We'll do reverse engineering and everything else, and make sure that the results that the vendor is promising are actually true. So that's another way to ensure that what you're getting is what you want.
Fantastic. Okay. Thank you, guys. So one of the other questions that we received was, how does this affect my property's LEED certifications? So Josh, maybe I'll kick that over to you. Goby obviously is a lead proven provider. You've been a key part of that. How are we seeing this impact for lead certification?
So, yeah, there's certainly some planning involved now that we have to move forward and know what our new scores are. Good thing is LEED came out with a couple of things. One of them is performance score. So that's their used to be called dynamic plaque. The rating and the green building certification for that is not necessarily based on the score itself. It's more performance based. So we want to get you that savings. So if the building is staying the same energy efficient, using the same amount of energy it always has, then that's okay. But they want to see your energy use going down over time, and that really where it helps get you into the performance score. So LEED is not out of the question if your score dropped below the 75 that they need now. And also, one of the things that Goby spent a lot of time on ahead of the metric change is we downloaded a ton of documents. So on all of our customers, we have documents that can be used if they get a project in before next August. So the LEED folks came out with a ruling saying you can use pre-metric documents up until 1 year from the metric change. So we have those documents if you need them.
Awesome. Okay. And then it looks like there's another question as well associated with just getting started in general. You guys obviously gave a lot of really great recommendations and things to look for. Maybe as another thought from each of you, maybe Josh, I'll start with you. What would you say would be the first thing you'd recommend in terms of getting started?
Well, getting started, we want, there's plenty of resources out there to get started. You can start with, if you need some ideas, you can start planning. A lot of folks have been, your budgets are already done, but you want to, kick around some more ideas. Your utility has incentive programs. So, starting there with good incentives that will be applicable to your building. That's a great starting point. Engaging with someone like Rob to start building that plan and get you the savings that you need and start help using Goby for getting the target, letting you know how much savings you need. That's kind of a good point to get started. And then if you want to get started with energy efficiency, a lot of times kind of need an idea, whether you have an idea and you can kind of start going from there, or if you need someone to come and audit your facility, that's where someone like Rob comes in.
Rob, how about on your end? What would you suggest?
I agree with Josh. So there's a lot of resources out there online, both through the utility company and elsewhere, that sort of can give you lists even of where you might want to start looking. And those are actually distilled down to building types as well. So depending upon the expertise that you have already in-house, that might be a good place to start. Again, if you don't have that expertise, or you find that they can only take you so far, then you definitely want to find a good energy engineering firm that can come in, do the audit, and do the designs and everything else for you. So.
Fantastic. Well, I think that wraps up if there's no other questions that we're seeing from the attendees. We appreciate everyone's time for joining today. Hopefully you saw it as a really great overview on the changes that occurred within Energy Star, as well as ways that you can come back to the score that you knew and loved before the changes. If there's any other questions, please feel free to reach out to us directly. We will be sending the recording of this webinar to all the attendees, as well as contact information. But thank you again for attending. We look forward to having you join our next one. Thanks so much.